Good morning, evening, and afternoon, and welcome to another SpunkGo webinar. Today's speaker is Louise O'Driscoll. She is a specialist in sustainability communications at Canon EMEA, and it's my greatest pleasure to welcome Louise to talk about communicating with purpose. Just a side note, Q&A will be done through the chat feature after her presentation where you all can ask questions. SpunkGo is an all-girls global student organization where proceeds go to charity. And with that, the floor is now yours, Louise. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, guys, some technical difficulties. Just give me a second. How about now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so yes, today's presentation will be about social impact, communicating with purpose. My name is Louise O'Driscoll. I work for Canon EMEA as a communication specialist. So you'll probably know Canon as a product manufacturer of cameras and printers, but really it's about a lot more than that for us. So we're actually able to use the products that we create to bring all sorts of value to communities, to young people. And that's what I really want to talk to you about today. So we've worked with over 50 charities, schools, and organizations out there at the forefront of making a difference for people. So I've covered a lot of different topics from gender equality to nutrition, all basically linked to the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. So I'm joining you today from my home, actually, here in London, because it's quite early on a Saturday here in the UK. So yeah, very glad to have you all here. And the flow of information is going to basically discuss in quite an open way about how I got into this kind of career, a little bit about the programs that I work on at Canon, and then we're going to talk a bit more about the values, the emotional values that are important when working with quite serious subject matters, and how I think that that's been a key part to the success of my work so far in my career. So let's just start off by thinking about this. What is social impact? So I've got two definitions here on my slide. The first is how people's organizations or people's actions affect the surrounding community. And the second is a term that's thrown around all over the place. About 3 billion search results on Google, but there's no one size fits all definition. So I think that's quite interesting. But what I find is that social impact professionals find themselves asking, what can I or my organization do to change the world? And I've
Louise, I'm
always
so sorry to interrupt. I don't think you were on the slide that you're talking about.
there might be a delay.
Maybe. I'm thinking so. Maybe reshare it, like remove it and reshare it, and maybe it'll update. Okay, yeah, now we can see it.
You see it? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So yes, so we have these two definitions, but I think the sort of the underlying statement here is that social impact is all about either individuals or organizations wanting to come together to make a change. So I've naturally found myself in this area of work, and I think that's because I have this real love for storytelling, and creating what I class as real and considered stories as well. So this is more than about just finding what's already out there, but sometimes it's about having a mission and going out and creating change that you can then communicate to others. I believe that we can feel social impact happening physically. So it can be, that feeling when people are coming together, either physically or virtually, a little bit like this actually, with a good thought in mind that they want to take action and they want to make a difference through the work that they're doing. Ultimately, we do this work as social impact professionals because it has a positive effect for brands, it has a positive effect for individuals, and it has a positive effect for the world. So I'm very blessed to be doing this this kind of work, and yeah, I'll move on to tell you a little bit more about that. So I just want to check that you guys can see my slide.
I don't think we can see the third slide, if that is the slide that you're referring to.
Right, let me.
Okay, yeah, I think it takes a bit to update.
Okay, that's fine. So I think although I've just said it's very hard to underpin one definition for social impact, the thing that definitely stands out is that it brings people together, and these are different people: sustainability activists, children, CEOs, all working to bring fresh ideas to the table. And people make change possible, whether they're 5 years old, 50 years old. It's really important to be able to communicate with people from different ages and from different locations as well. So here are just a few of the amazing people that I've worked with. The photograph there in the middle is with the Lord Mayor from the city where I studied. And he would be this amazing person who you'd always find him out there in the community, even though he was a public figure. You could bump into him a few times in one day at different youth events, really getting in there and really spending time with the people, which is really inspiring. And then in the top corner there on the left-hand side, I have a photograph. This is with a panel of judges that I actually put together every year for one of Canon's social impact initiatives, which is an award sponsorship for an award called the Global Good Awards. So this group of people is, again, different people working at different levels. So I've got a young person who took part in one of our programs. I've got a judge there from the United Nations, a few a children's author, children's storybook author, and one of our Canon ambassadors who's a storyteller. So again, when I'm putting things together like judging panels, exhibitions, collaborations, student programs, I'm always looking to go for this cross-sector approach by bringing the private sector together with other NGOs, and then also with young people as well. And that's something that is really important to me. Okay, so I'm going to move on a little bit just to talk about my education to career transition, because I know this is something that people find quite mind-boggling, as in how are you going to get from A to B? So how did I get here to doing this kind of filming and written work? So I started out in a small town in the UK where there wasn't really that much going on in terms of photography and communications on the kind of level that I'm working at now. So I studied photography full time from the age of 16 to 18. And one reason for that was I was at school, but I knew that I really wanted to go into the creative space. I'd spent my whole childhood around the arts, around dance, around music. It was very much, kind of what I how I lived. So it was then when I was thinking about going to university that I decided to move to a surrounding city. And this is when things started to get quite interesting for me, because I realized how competitive it really would be to get into the kind of career that I wanted to do. One thing that I always found really important was staying on track. So keeping photography and culture in my work in whatever way possible. So sometimes that meant working a job and volunteering on the side. Sometimes that meant doing a mix of paid work through photography and other work. But I always kept the things that I loved in my life, and that is something that I would really recommend doing. So if you have that passion and that draw to do something specific, whether it's sport, art, mathematics, whatever that thing is, I think you should always keep hold of that dream and follow it. So at that point, I was just coming to the end of my BA degree, and I wanted to take on an internship. So I started looking for a paid internship, which ended up sending me to America to work at a US summer camp. That was because that was the only paid internship that I could find at the time with the experience I had. So I went off to America, I worked at this summer camp, and we had children from over 27 countries and a lot of families. my role was kind of focused around creating videos about the campus experiences and doing the photography there, running their blog, all of these things. So I realized at that point I had a passion not just for storytelling and telling stories, but also for bringing people together from different lands to enjoy that very intimate experience of storytelling. So yeah, it gave me this real ambition to work more with children. And then when I returned to the UK, I was studying the final year of my degree, and I started to take on more voluntary work and paid work doing that kind of stuff. So there was a moment that has stood out to me and stayed with me, I guess, that's driven me to do more around giving back to the community. And that took place when I was graduating from my master's degree, and I walked out of university for what I thought would be the last time. And I used to go down this hill to get on the train back to my hometown from the city that I studied in. I got to the bottom of the hill and I'd been thinking about how am I going to build photography into a career? How am I going to get there? I need some more support. Why isn't there more around in the community to get young entrepreneurs into this kind of work? So I got to the bottom of that hill and I turned around and I walked back up it and I went back into my university. So I asked, is there anything more for students? Like, is there any more opportunities I can apply for? And they asked me to just sit and wait. So I waited there for quite a while. And then I had an appointment with a man who told me about an opportunity to apply for a startup graduate scheme. So I did that. I applied, I filled in the forms, and luckily I was successful in that. And this was a really important moment for me because alongside getting the belief that, people liked my idea about doing these cultural projects and saw potential in it, this enabled me to buy a new professional camera, which I actually went on to use to film presidents, to go to United Nations events, to do some really high profile stuff. I got office space and I also got a mentor. So this was something that was really invaluable, and it made me think, wow, I wish that there was more opportunities out there. But in the same breath, it also made me think you do sometimes have to find those opportunities. And I think what's pretty amazing now is there is so much stuff out there online. There's websites dedicated to internships, youth opportunities, all of these things. And if you can show, real passion and dedication, then I think it's really worth going for those opportunities. So something I'd always recommend is really exploring what your university has to offer and what youth opportunities that are out there for you to apply for in an early career capacity. So yeah, so after that, after I finished this graduate scheme, I took on my first proper professional role as a videographer. And eventually that took me into working with NGOs such as the World Girl Guiding Association, the Scouts Association, and with NGOs such as the Global Initiative to End All Corporal Punishment of Children. So yeah, I started to do a lot more research, written work, which came natural to me because even at the early stage of my career, I would always be writing reviews of the events I was at. I'd work quite closely with business directors to see how visual imagery and videography could help to build brands. So yeah, so this was sort of a natural progression for me. Okay, so moving on. So what brought me to Canon specifically? Well, I've always loved photography and people, and I've always made it my business to be around it. So, I've been a scriptwriter, a director, a photographer. I've done all of these different roles at different levels, but I've always kept this sort of narrative around me. And I wanted to share some of my photographs with you today, which I wouldn't always usually share in presentations, but these are very much the photos that sort of keep me going and keep the dream alive, so to speak. And I have this quote here: photography takes an instant out of time, altering life by holding it still. And that really is what photography is to me. You have these memories, you meet these people, and it's sort of a beautiful way to display who they are. So the two portrait shots I have here, they're from a project I did with local artists in my community. So I have a DJ here and a fashion designer that I work with outside of my professional work. And then also I have an image from a collaboration I did with Canon last year with the United Nations Development Programme in Rome, which was really exciting. And another image here from a project I was doing with Girl Guiding out in Uganda, filming the stories of young teachers. So yes, so moving on, I don't know if you can see the slide update yet, but there's a few small images here. And again, it's just all about connecting these people together. So we actually run two key programs for social impact at Canon that I want to tell you about today. And these are three images from one of these programs, which is called the Canon Young People Program. So I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we've worked with over 50 NGO organizations and schools to bring photography into communities. And I think it's always incredible, when brands can do something that's very true to their mission, and use that as their way to deliver social impact. So yeah, I mean, we've put on exhibitions in shopping centres that display the work that these young people have taken. We've been able to take them to some of the world's biggest events, such as the World Expo in Dubai. And it's just a program that grows every year. So it's really incredible. And again, to communicate this kind of program is quite a big responsibility and can be approached in many different ways, which I'll get onto. But these are just a few of the images that I wanted to share with you. Okay, so the next program I wanted to talk to you about is an award sponsorship. So I play quite a big part in this award, which is our Global Good Award sponsorship, and it recognizes young people who are driving positive change across any area of sustainability. So alongside planning the campaign for this, I'm often, checking in with the winners and looking up opportunities for them to take part in global speaking events. Some of our winners from last year and finalists featured in a video series with Warner Brothers Discovery. So that was really exciting for them to talk a bit about their story. And it's quite nice to be asked to do this webinar today by Netra, because she was our Canon Young Champion in 2022, which is really incredible. So yes, Netra, I want to thank you for taking part and for winning that award. Is really incredible honour. So I also wanted to mention we're currently accepting entries for this award. So if anybody is taking part in a sustainability related campaign, maybe you're going into a school and delivering a program, or really anything, inventing something. It could really be anything around sustainability. We accept entries from under 25s from countries around the world. So I've put the URL there if anyone's interested to read more. It's globalgoodawards.co.uk. So yeah, it's there to check out. Okay, so I've introduced you to two of the key programs that I work on, but what I want to talk to you a little bit more about is social impact stories, and what it takes to sort of connect with your audience when you're making a story. And I think a big part of that is, how is your audience going to intercept the information that you tell them? Because something we can do a lot is think about the story we want to tell, but often the best approach is to think about the way that that story is going to be received. So it's kind of turning the narrative back on itself to some extent. So some of the stories I work on might be something, it could just be communicating what somebody else is doing, such as an exhibition or a community activity. But then other stories are, I guess, something that I create or try to make happen. So again, it can all depend on what the real message is within the action that's happened. So do you want to focus on the person that was part of the program, or do you want to talk about the program itself, or maybe on a global level how it works with different countries coming together? So it's about being able to work that out and think about what the audience wants. So some of the most important things, I think, is thought-provoking stories. So something that makes somebody quite surprised and think of something new. Being authentic. Social impact is all about authenticity. You always find people looking for those real stories. And working in sustainability, obviously authenticity is always the goal for us. So yeah, getting that real message, including the personal details. Again, that's a big part of proving the authenticity. So if it's a story about a person, you want to know those little intricate moments that really make you understand their journey. Does it teach you something new? Again, a big part of being thought provoking. Did you learn something? Does it excite or move the audience? Human truths. Is the story understood within a wider economy? Again, a lot of stories that trend have a place in the wider economy, or maybe you want to adopt something like an international day and sort of put your story together within that context. Keeping stories concise. So yeah, keeping it into one narrative. So again, it might mean that you really want to focus on just one person who took part in this program out of the 2,000 people, or maybe it's about something else, but you need to know as the writer what it is about for you, and relevant to your audience. So again, is it even if it's something that the audience might think isn't relevant, is it something that they're sort of ready to receive that information? Okay, so I wanted to move on to talk a little bit about how we can tell these stories. Now we know what they need to contain. So there's many different ways to activate stories. So we have the typical articles, blogs, videos, photos, but it can also be about getting activation from others. So one of the things that I do as an EMEA level worker, I guess, so to speak, is provide people with assets to tell those stories. So if you're running, even a smaller program, by getting the people within that program to tell the story themselves, you create, brand advocates or program advocates, and that can actually really help to get your social story out. So I think this is something that's always good to keep in mind. And some of the ways that I do this is creating certificates that I give to people who've taken part in our program. So I have a photograph here of 3 participants who took part in the Canon Young People program from World Cleanup Day, which is a global organization. You may have heard of it. People come together every year specifically to do this, but there's activity all around the year, cleaning up neighborhoods. It's really, really inspiring. So yeah, when they took part in the program, they were given some assets to ask if they want to post about the experience there. So yeah, it can be about thinking about more than just how you personally are going to put it out on your channel. It's about enabling others to talk about what they learned, and that really then becomes a good way to get personal views on the information that you're giving out. So I definitely recommend that. So I just want to move on to talk quickly about how important that message is. Okay, so again, when I'm choosing photos, I always think about how do the people in the photos look. So I have 2 portraits at the bottom here that I took when I was out on an assignment, and I wanted to tell the story of the beauty of these people, the sort of happiness that comes with education. So choosing photographs where people look proud, smiling is what I wanted to convey there. But when we're doing thought leadership, so I have a quote here that I wrote about education, and when we're writing article titles, it can be again about just keeping it really concise, but making sure that, this one, 5 things I've learned whilst trying to change the world. It's very easy for the reader to understand what they're about to learn when they read that title, and that might make them click on it. So, yeah, always think about these things when you're putting your narrative together. So I'm only going to touch on the next section very briefly, but this is very much how I would see what puts me in the position to do this, what makes me a good candidate to do this kind of work. And I'm very aware of my inner, and especially when you're filming people or, working with teams across different locations, it's really important to be able to help people to express themselves when you're telling their stories. So I always try to be authentic and driven by my genuine purpose, self advocate. So talk about the work I'm doing myself so that people find out more about it. Speak up, because if you don't speak up, somebody else will. Don't be afraid to get out there and talk about your views. Have a growth mindset. I'm not afraid to take a leap of faith. I use my time wisely and I reflect. Me versus me. So I compare myself to myself, not to others. And I own my own values so they're not affected by, other people's values, basically. And these things are just, really important when you're dealing with quite important subject matters. And this supports me to give to others, listen to them, recognize hard work, understanding people's perspective, empowering others to tell their story. I'm aware of how my words make people feel. I reserve judgment. I'll congratulate people when they make achievements, and I'll go the extra mile because they deserve it, because, these subject matters can be really hardworking people. I just want to touch on one thing when I say I recognize your hard work. Sometimes when you do a proposal for a project, or, you're working on a campaign, or whatever you're doing, maybe it's something that didn't work out in the end for whatever reason, but if you can see that somebody in your team or somebody working for you is doing a really good job and putting a lot of effort into that, still thank them, because advocacy workers can experience a lot of failure with the successes that they have. So just always being, giving people that thank you for the work you do. Like, I value you. I want you around the work that I do. It's, again, I find that really important. And this is kind of my final slide, I guess. But this is just something called the emotional bank account, which you can read up more about if you're interested in these sort of work values, I would say. And the emotional bank account has a narrative of basically you deposit and withdraw, I guess, actions in the same way that you would money in a financial bank account. And to keep working relationships and, relationships with people that might have emotional experience, to keep that level, you need to make sure you don't drain the emotional bank account, right? So it's all about keeping the promises you make, being kind, being apologetic, being open to feedback. But when you withdraw, you might do things that sort of test a relationship. And again, I think this is why it's always important to understand the values that you have, and to understand the way that you work with others, basically. So yeah, I think that pretty much brings me to the end of my presentation. So if anybody wants to contact me about my work, any thoughts about the presentation, please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. This is my LinkedIn handle there. And yeah, the Canon Young Champion category that I mentioned, I've put the link here. So again, it's globalgoodawards.co.uk. So if you want to read more about the prize, about the competition that's open, then everything is on that website there. And I think that brings me to the end, so I'll pass back over to Netra.
Thank you so much, Louise, for this lovely presentation. I think, especially with working in social impact, it's not very meaningful if you're not able to talk about the work that you do. So we have a few questions here from the audience. The first is, what media forms do you think are most effective with social impact stories?
It's a really good question. So I think it really depends on the specific story. And one reason I would say that is it's important to understand the moment in time that that story is landing in. And that's why I mentioned something earlier about whether you want to, pin what you're doing to an international day, whether it's something that's relevant in the media. So obviously for myself, I mentioned a lot about the arts. So, if there's struggle around people doing the arts, or maybe a lack of educational classes about the arts, and that's a trending topic, then maybe you want to go out with a press release. Maybe that's going to get picked up. But if it's something that's more, more of just a cool story, so to speak, then maybe you need to go out on social, and maybe you need to channel that through, an influencer, or somebody who already has, an audience that can appreciate that kind of message. So again, with social media, there's obviously platforms that have all different kinds of benefits, but I think it's all about just understanding the story, where it fits in, and that moment of time as well. And that may be, in fact, the thing that makes you want to slightly shift the narrative that you're telling. So it could be that, the wider program you're working on doesn't quite fit current attention, but the person's experience within that program might actually have a completely different and more significant message. So it's about being able to work all of those things out and pre-planning really what you're doing and where you're planning for it to go.
Definitely, it definitely depends on the type of story that you're trying to tell. The next question is, what kind of indicators are used to check on how well impact stories are being received, other than, the reach of it or other common indicators?
Yeah, this is a great topic to bring up, especially when we talk about measuring social impact communications in general. So there's all kinds of different tools you can use. So again, if it's for press releases and media articles, then you can use AI monitoring, which will tell you, pretty much every little detail, from how many articles went out globally with one fixed term. So you can obviously put in the term that you're looking for, which might be the name of your program, or anything specific around trending topics. I also think another good way to measure is not just, we can look at number of articles or number of readership, but I always think an important thing is what happened after that, though. What happened after this took place? Was there any further follow up there? So yeah, these are all sorts of indicators that we can look at. As we know, getting high numbers is good, but sometimes it's about those individual stories. And one amazing thing that I'd like to mention here is through our Canon Young People program, some of our students have actually gone on to become teachers of the program. And when I hear this, it makes me feel amazing, because I know that those people who took part in that program have then gone on to start to teach on that program, and then inspire others to be able to do photography and storytelling work. So, what kind of better outcome could you have there? So yeah, there's many different ways.
Can social impact storytelling be useful for getting funding or talking to investors?
Yes, 1,000,000%. And this is something that I've experienced previously in my career through creating videos. And I didn't really touch on it probably enough, but videography was a massive, massive part of me being able to be successful in this kind of work, because when I started making videos, there wasn't that many people, especially coming from a smaller city. There wasn't that many people around me doing what I was doing. So yeah, I found myself using videos in funding proposals, actually, and at times that is what made them successful. And I'm very, very passionate about the fact that video can change opinions. It can make the difference because I've seen this happen. So yeah, absolutely. It's really, again, it's about what does that video really say? And if you can prove something through a video, how incredible is that? So maybe it's somebody talking about a community service and how it's different to other funded services and what exactly it offers to people. You'd be surprised, even some of the biggest donors out there, when you tell them that personal story, even though the statistics, we need the statistics, absolutely. But we also do need to see that personal story though, because that's what makes it real. And we're human, right? So we want to see the proof. So yeah, I would say it's really good to have both. Obviously, we want both and we need to be driven by data, but video is, yeah, it's a really good evidence to have. And I would also just say the quality of the video is not even the biggest thing, because you could have the best quality video with no narrative. So be driven by the message and by the narrative.
I think during your presentation, you mentioned having hard conversations. And so how do you stay positive when you're in these conversations or in general negative situations? Are there any language techniques that you think are useful?
Yeah, so in terms of filming people, the absolute thing I always try to do is know who I'm going to film before I meet them, if it's possible. If it's possible, that's really helpful because I can learn a bit about their story. I can just quickly check out, who am I going to be meeting? Is it, is it a really serious issue? Is it something that might be quite difficult for them to talk about? So I definitely always recommend that. But I'd say just a lot of the sort of skills that I put on that slide around how you are with people. So empathy, empower people to tell their stories. If people don't feel comfortable with you, then they aren't going to be good. You're not going to get a good interview at the end of it. So you need to be able to have patience with people. You need to be able to understand where they're coming from, because they aren't you ultimately. And when I was younger and I was filming sort of youth service users, I would explain to them sometimes, if I was filming them, what that film was going to be used for. And sometimes that would then make them, want to take part, because they understand, okay, this film is actually going to help us to get more funding, more money. This is going to keep this service here. And sometimes it did take for me to explain to people at all levels, we need to keep this going. How are we going to talk about what we're doing, and how am I going to get people in here that can make us grow? So yeah, it's really important to be able to work with people at different ages, at different levels, and to just have empathy and understand that ultimately, if everybody's trying to create a better world, then there must be commonalities between us. So that's what I would say. Also, I like to get the camera rolling before I start doing the interview, to just get any B-roll, because that can be a good way to get some natural content as well. So yeah, that can be quite useful.
I think you touched upon this in the previous question, but can you share some of the most important or let's say powerful communication techniques to connect with the people whose story that you're trying to tell?
I think there's been quite different ones for different situations again. So I think maybe being able to read people is such a big thing here. But yeah, sometimes, I've told people things about my life because I know it will help us to connect. Sometimes I've asked them more about certain things when it's been appropriate, to again get people to feel comfortable around me. Other times I've had to stand my ground around, what this interview is and what we've agreed to, because you can experience it in the other way, where your values as an image maker and a photographer can be tested by the subject, let's say. So again, it's about you do need to be able to be quite strong. One thing that has always surprised me is when I started to work on quite serious subject matters such as gender equality, ending violence against children, quite serious things, nutrition topics. I personally found that whilst working on those topics, I've met some of the most inspiring people I've ever met in my life, which the emotional side for me, I found that was sort of the way that I dealt with it, because again, I was meeting these people that were so incredible, that it just made it all worth it. And I didn't find much trouble dealing with the topics that I was working on through that. I guess it was all done in a positive way, because again, we're all working towards progress. So yeah.
So this next question, you can answer it in the sense of personal opinion or maybe just the trends that you're seeing emerging, but how do you think AI will impact storytelling or let's say social impact as you've been on many projects and you've seen the inspiring work that people are doing? How do you think AI is going to change this landscape?
Yeah, it's a great question, and a question that I don't really have much of an answer for. One reason for that is I have to say I am, a lover of technology, a lover of products, but I also very much place myself in the real world because, I love being out there with people, or even if I'm doing something at a global level, I want to find those little stories that are things that are happening. So I think it's kind of like the same as when the internet was created, right? It's such a big concept and it could really go anywhere. So I think it's something that I definitely want to read up more on as well and think about. But at the same time, I think there's a big movement of so called like nostalgic movement. I'm a very nostalgic person as well. So I think a lot of young change makers are kind of, yeah, they're kind of looking at challenging that culture, which is very interesting. But yeah, I think there'll always be a big space um for this real advocacy work. I'd like to see more around AI that's used to create positive impact though. And again, it's something I've not looked into yet, but I'm sure that there's creators out there studying these kinds of ideas.
Yeah, I think as AI develops, we'll see new ways to potentially use it for good. Mhm. Has there been a story that you have told personally that has really stuck with you? And do you think anything about the way that the story was told impacted that?
Yes, there's a story that really stands out to me. Well, there's many, but one I will tell you about is a young woman that I interviewed in Tanzania. And I'd actually been involved in a press release about her story when I was working in the UK. And she basically sets up gardens in schools across Tanzania. So they grow all kinds of nutritious foods, fruit and veg, just the basics, but what can be used to make a lot of good meals. And this woman is amazing. I mean, she's met the prime minister. She's done a lot of policy work. She's really changed the game for so many other people. And I was going to Africa actually on a assignment. And as soon as I was going on that assignment, I thought I have to go and meet Najra, find her. So I settled my plan to get there, and it involved getting on a bus for around 10 hours. I was on this bus in Tanzania. It's so green, so you just keep going around. And then I got there and it was just amazing. Like it was such an amazing experience to meet her in real life. So I took her a gift to say thank you. I explained to her that even just through the written word, her story had been so impactful to so many people and allowed me to actually grow the program that she was part of. So to reach more people, which is always the aim. But when I was out there, I was able to obviously film her, meet her teacher, um, and I'm glad that I did meet her teacher because she was an amazing influence as well on this work that was being done. And what I found incredible was her school syllabus had so many of the prevalent topics in society included that you wouldn't always see. So she was teaching about all of the the real stuff that's going on out there that that girls really need to learn when they're at school. And I just found it so forward thinking and inspirational, to be honest. So being able to capture that through video and show that to the donor of the program, who reacted incredibly, obviously, to see, wow, this is, this is really great, this is real, this is really happening. Yeah, so it was an incredible experience to be able to bring that story to life through video.
Thank you so much, Louise. Do you have any sort of concluding remarks for the audience today?
I just think for anybody who is interested in this kind of work, one thing I've learned is that the further you go, the more that you do, that you will experience a lot of setbacks, and that will happen to you in many ways. So it may be that people, kind of think, why are you doing that? Or maybe they want to do that. Or maybe it's more setbacks around, the plan that you had didn't really work out, but you wanted to do something good. Why didn't it work out? The further you get along, the more it will happen, and it's absolutely normal. And never let that take you off your path, because if you stay true to yourself, if you keep connecting with good people, value those people around you, and yeah, it's so important to realize that so many young activists and advocacy workers, even CEOs, we're all experiencing these difficulties. So yeah, keep believing in yourself. And like I say, I'm more than happy to hear from anybody that wants to pick up with me personally on this topic as well.
Thank you again. I think someone was asking, they're from Tanzania, and do you have like the story that you have access, a link maybe that you can just paste in our chat or anything to access the story?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. I will send you some links to the story.
Okay, great. Thank you so much again, Louise, for coming here and taking the time out of your day to present this. I think because in the audience today, we have a lot of social impact people and change makers, young people who are looking to make the world a better place. Storytelling is an important art that they will obviously need to use. So thank you again. Thank you to our audience for listening and interacting. Some of these questions have been really, really good and really interesting. If you need any more details, please visit our website, www.spunkgo.com. Thank you, everyone, and have a good day ahead.